Sunday morning, 9:14 a.m. The table was set. Orange juice, toast, coffee, and eggs, soft-boiled, the way I had made them every Sunday for 7 years. My husband James across from me, our son Owen between us. 5 years old, still in his pajamas. A perfectly ordinary Sunday morning. And then Owen put down his spoon. He looked at the egg cup in front of his father, and he said, "Daddy doesn't like them like that anymore, Mummy." I looked at my son. "He likes the ones Aunt Ruth makes," Owen said. "The runny ones with the yellow in the middle. We went to her house when you were at work. Daddy ate 2 of them, and he said they were his favorite. And then he kissed Aunt Ruth on the cheek." The kitchen. Sunday morning light through the window, orange juice, toast, coffee, soft-boiled eggs. I looked at my husband. His face was the color of the tablecloth. My name is Claire Whitmore. I am 35 years old. I have lived in Savannah, Georgia for my entire life, the historic district, the part of the city where the streets are named for the squares they run through, and the houses have been standing long enough to have opinions about the people inside them. My family has been in Savannah for 4 generations. My grandmother's grandmother is buried in the same cemetery where, on certain Tuesday evenings, I walk my dog and think about the particular weight of a city that remembers everything. Savannah remembers everything. I am beginning to understand why that matters. I need to tell you about Ruth before I tell you anything else. Ruth Beaumont is my mother's younger sister. She is 44 years old, never married, a fact that in the particular social grammar of Savannah had been the subject of gentle concern from my grandmother until my grandmother died, and occasional comment from my mother since. Ruth had always been, in the language of the family, particular. She had high standards. She was selective. She had not found the right person. She lived alone in a house on Jones Street, a beautiful house, a renovated Victorian that she had bought 15 years ago and had made over those 15 years into the specific kind of home that reflects a person completely. Books everywhere, a garden in the back that she tended obsessively, a kitchen that was the most important room in the house. Ruth is an extraordinary cook. This is incidental to the story. Ruth is an extraordinary cook, and she knows it, and the people who love her know it, and her kitchen has always been, for as long as I can remember, the center of every family gathering. Thanksgiving at Ruth's house, Easter at Ruth's house, the specific Sunday dinners that my mother's family have been having in one form or another for 40 years. I grew up at Ruth's table. I learned to cook at Ruth's table. When James and I got engaged, Ruth took me aside at the engagement party, which was at her house, of course, and she told me that the most important thing in a marriage was feeding each other well. She said it with the specific conviction of someone who believes that love is expressed through nourishment, that caring for someone's hunger is a form of intimacy. I had found that beautiful. I find it differently now. James Whitmore is 38 years old. He is an architect, residential, the kind that works with old houses rather than new ones, which is the correct kind of architect to be in Savannah. He has been in Savannah for 12 years, which makes him a transplant by the city's standards, but a long-term one. He knows the city the way people come to know a place they chose, rather than inherited, with a specific appreciation that those born into it sometimes lack. He is thoughtful, patient, the kind of man who reads the room in social situations and adjusts accordingly. He is very good at adjusting accordingly. I understand that differently now. We married 7 years ago. Owen was born 2 years after that. Sunday morning, March. Owen in his pajamas. Daddy doesn't like them like that anymore, Mummy. I want to describe the moment precisely. Not the emotional shape of it, that would come later in the days and weeks after, when I had the space to feel the full weight of it, but the physical, immediate, sensory moment. The kitchen was warm. We had the heat on. Savannah in March is warm enough by afternoon, but still cool in the mornings. And the specific morning chill that comes through old windows had not yet been chased away by the sun. The eggs were in their cups. James had not yet touched his. He had been looking at his phone, a small habit of Sunday mornings, checking something, the specific half-present quality of a man who is at the table but not fully at the table. Owen was eating his own egg. He had been focused on the toast soldiers, which are the point of soft-boiled eggs for a 5-year-old, and which he had been systematically dipping and eating with great concentration. He put down his spoon. He looked at his father's untouched egg, and he spoke. I watched James's face while Owen talked. I have watched James's face for 7 years. I know his face the way you know the face of someone you have slept beside for 7 years. Its specific landscape, its tells, its particular ways of hiding and revealing what is underneath. I watched his face, and I saw something I had seen before, once or twice, in moments I had attributed to other things. A small tightening around the eyes, a stillness that was not relaxation, but its opposite. The face of a person who has just understood that a door they thought was closed has been opened, by a 5-year-old, with a comment about an egg. Owen finished his observation and went back to his toast soldiers, completely satisfied, having contributed useful information to the breakfast table. He was 5 years old. He thought he was being helpful. I looked at James. James was looking at the tablecloth. I picked up my coffee. I drank it. I said, "Owen, do you want more juice?" "Yes, please," Owen said. I poured the juice. I ate my egg. We finished breakfast. After breakfast, Owen went to watch television in the living room. The specific cartoon that he watched on Sunday mornings, I had set it up for him before we sat down to eat, the automatic preparatory act of a parent who has learned their child's rhythms, played from the living room. The sound of it, slightly too loud, the way children like it. James began clearing the table. He moved carefully. The specific careful of a man who had understood that he is in a situation and does not yet know its parameters. I let him clear. I sat with my coffee. When he came back from the kitchen, he stood in the doorway. He said, "Claire?" "Not now," I said. I think, Owen is in the next room," I said. "Not now." He was quiet. He sat back down. We sat at the table together in the specific silence of a Sunday morning that has become something else, while maintaining the appearance of what it was. Owen laughed at something on the television. The sound of it, bright, uncomplicated, entirely separate from anything happening at the table, filled the room. I thought about Ruth, about the specific shape of her kitchen, which I knew as well as my own, about standing at her counter at the age of 12, learning to peel garlic properly, Ruth's hands over mine demonstrating the technique, about the way she had told James at our engagement party that feeding someone well was a form of love. I thought about that sentence in a different way than I had thought about it before. And I thought about how long I had been making James his Sunday eggs. 7 years. Every Sunday. Soft-boiled. Because that was what he had told me that he preferred. Daddy doesn't like them like that anymore. At some point, the preference had changed, and he had not told me. He had told Ruth. Owen went to my mother's after lunch. a planned visit. Sunday afternoons at Grandma's were a regular part of Owen's week, and I had said nothing to change it. I had put him in the car with his backpack and his stuffed elephant and driven him to my mother's house on Gaston Street, and my mother had come to the door and taken Owen's hand and looked at my face over his head for one brief moment. "I'll bring him back by 5, she said. "Thank you," I said. She looked at me for another moment. "Call me," she said quietly. "Later," I said. I drove home. James was in the living room. He had been waiting. I sat down across from him, and I said, "Tell me everything, not a version, everything." He told me. It had started 9 months ago, September. A family dinner at Ruth's, one of the regular Sunday dinners, the ones that happened every few weeks that I attended with Owen and James, the same way I had been attending them my entire life. That particular Sunday, I had left early. Owen was coming down with something, and I had taken him home, while James stayed to help with the dishes, as he sometimes did, because James was the kind of guest who helped with dishes. He had stayed longer than dishes. He had come home very late and said Ruth had wanted to talk, that she was going through something difficult, that he had stayed to keep her company. I had believed him. Why wouldn't I? He was my husband. She was my aunt. 9 months since September, since a family dinner at a table I had been sitting at since I was a child. 9 months of Sundays. He told me all of it, or he told me the version he was willing to tell. I sat and I listened, and I let him talk, because that is what I had asked for, everything, not a version. And because I have learned in 35 years that the most useful thing you can do when someone is telling you a truth they've been hiding is to be very still so they don't stop. He talked for a long time. When he finished, I was quiet. I thought about September. I thought about the Sunday dinner, about leaving early with Owen and James staying to help with the dishes. And I thought about something else. Something that had been sitting at the edge of my mind since the breakfast table and had, as he talked, slowly moved to the center of it. Ruth had called me in October, a month after September. She had called me on a Tuesday afternoon, and I had attributed it to the general emotional weather of Ruth's life, which had its seasons like anyone's. She had been warm and present, and asked about Owen in the specific, detailed way of someone who was paying close attention. She had asked about James. She had asked, which was slightly unusual, how things were between us. I had told her things were fine. I had thought she was checking in. She was not checking in. She was doing something else entirely. She was taking inventory of what I knew. James finished talking at 3:17. I know the time because I looked at the clock when he stopped, not deliberately, just the reflexive action of a person whose mind is trying to anchor itself in something concrete. 3:17 p.m. He had been talking for 53 minutes. I had not interrupted once. When he finished, he looked at me with the specific expression of a man who has said a thing and is waiting to understand what the consequence of saying it will be. I looked at him for a long time. Then I said, "I need you to leave for a few hours. I need to think." "Claire." "James," I said, "I asked you to tell me everything, and you did. Now I need you to give me the house for a few hours." He nodded. He picked up his keys. He left. I sat in the living room for a long time. Then I got up. I went to the kitchen. I looked at the egg cups still drying in the rack by the sink. I had washed them after breakfast, the automatic continuation of Sunday morning routine, the kind of thing your hands do while your mind is somewhere else. 4 egg cups, the ceramic ones with the blue stripe that my grandmother had given us as a wedding gift. I looked at them, and I thought about Ruth. Not about what she had done, that was too large and too close to look at directly yet. I thought about her in the specific way you think about someone you have known your entire life when you are trying to understand how something you thought you knew about them turned out to be wrong. I thought about the things that were true. Ruth had loved me. I believed that still. The specific love of an aunt who had been a consistent and genuine presence in my life for 35 years, that was real. I could not look at 9 months and have it erase 35 years. But I could hold both. Both things were true, and one of them had to be addressed. I picked up my phone. I did not call Ruth. I called my friend Margot. Margot Chen has been my closest friend since we were 22 years old. We met in graduate school, urban history, which is the correct thing to study if you love Savannah and want to understand why, and we have been for 13 years the specific kind of friends who have seen each other through everything. She answered on the second ring. "What happened?" she said. Not hello. Sisters and best friends skip hello in certain moments. "I need you to come over," I said. "On my way," she said. She arrived in 18 minutes. She came in, looked at my face, went to the kitchen, and made tea. She brought it to the living room. She sat across from me. "Tell me," she said. I told her. Owen's words at the breakfast table, James's 53 minutes, 9 months, September, the Sunday dinner. And then the thing I had been sitting with for the hour between James leaving and Margot arriving, the thing I had not been able to look at directly until I had someone to look at it with. "I called her in October," I said. "I told you about it at the time. You said she was probably just checking in." "I remember," Margot said. "She was checking in on what I knew," I said. "She was managing her exposure." Margot was quiet for a moment. "You think she knew exactly what she was doing," Margot said. "I think," I said carefully, "that Ruth is very intelligent, and I think intelligent people do not stumble into things the way less intelligent people do. They make choices, and then they manage the consequences of those choices." 9 months is a long time to manage, Margot said. "Yes. What are you going to do?" I had been thinking about this since 9:14 a.m. "I don't know yet," I said. "About James, I think I know. But Ruth is—" I stopped. "Ruth is different?" Margot said. "She is," I said. "She's family. She's been my family my entire life. And she—" I stopped again. "She used that," Margot quietly said. "Yes," I said. "She used it." I called my mother that evening. Owen was back. She had brought him home at 5, as promised, and I had given him dinner and put him to bed and read him the story he chose and turned off the light and stood in the doorway of his room for a moment listening to his breathing. 5 years old. He had no idea what he had done at the breakfast table. He had simply shared information that seemed relevant to the egg situation. He had been asleep for 40 minutes when I called my mother. Her name is Margaret. She is 63. She has lived on Gaston Street for 30 years. She has known Ruth her entire life. 43 years of being sisters. 43 years of Sunday dinners and family gatherings, and the specific intimacy of sisters who have grown up in the same house and continued, in their different ways, in the same city. She answered on the third ring. "Claire?" she said, the tone of someone who has been waiting for a call. "Mom," I said, "I need to ask you something." "Okay," she said. "Did you know?" A silence. A silence that was not nothing. "Mom? Not—" She stopped, started again. "Not what you know. I didn't know that. But Another stop. "There were moments. Things I noticed. Things I told myself were nothing because it was Ruth," I said. "Because it was Ruth," she said. We sat with that for a moment. "When?" I said. The moments. She told me. A family dinner in November, 2 months after September. She had noticed the way Ruth looked at James across the table. She had told herself it was nothing because she did not want it to be something. A phone call in January. Ruth had asked about James, specifically, carefully, in a way that had felt slightly off to my mother, but that she had attributed to Ruth's general tendency to take interest in people. "I should have told you," my mother said. "Yes," I said. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know," I said. "I know, Mom." We talked for a long time. At the end of it, she said, "What do you need?" "I need to know," I said, "whether what I'm about to do is going to destroy our family, or whether our family can survive it." My mother was quiet for a moment. "Our family," she said finally, "has survived things before. It will survive this. What it survives as, that I don't know, but it will survive." "Okay," I said. "Claire," she said. "Yes?" "She is my sister," she said, "and she is wrong. Both of those things are true. I will not ask you to choose one or let go of the other." I held the phone. "Thank you, Mom," I said. I did not call Ruth that Sunday, or the Monday after, or the Tuesday. I needed to understand something first, something that had been forming in my mind since the breakfast table, and that had taken 3 days to take a shape I could work with. I needed to understand what Ruth had been thinking, not in order to forgive it. Forgiveness was not the immediate question, but in order to understand what I was actually dealing with. A mistake made in a moment of weakness that had become 9 months through a failure of courage to end it, or something more deliberate, more calculated. The October phone call. She had called to take inventory of what I knew. That is not a mistake. That is management. I thought about the things Ruth had said over the 9 months. The specific things she had said to me at family dinners and on phone calls and in the ordinary texture of an aunt and niece relationship that I now, with this new information, was looking at again. She had, in November, told me that James seemed tired, that I should take care of him. She had offered it as concern, the concern of a woman who cared about the family's well-being. She had, in January, asked what James and I had planned for our anniversary in March. She had asked what I was thinking of doing for him. She had made suggestions. She had been doing something with those conversations, managing the information, monitoring the situation, ensuring that I remained in a particular relationship to events that she and James were controlling from the other side. I am a historian by training. I understand the difference between a primary source and a constructed narrative. Ruth had been constructing a narrative, 9 months of it, and I had been reading it as her concern for me. On Wednesday, I called an attorney, and on Thursday, I called Ruth. She answered on the first ring. "Claire," she said. Her voice, the voice I had known my entire life, warm, a little husky, the voice of someone who has spent decades in a house full of conversation and cooking and the specific warmth of a person who makes their home into a place people want to be. I had loved that voice. I had felt, hearing it, the complicated thing of loving someone who has done something that cannot be undone. The specific grief of a love that has not gone away, but been placed in a context that changes its meaning. "Ruth," I said. A pause. "I've been waiting for this call," she said. "I know," I said. "How did you find out?" "Owen." I said. A longer pause. He was there once, in September. He was with James. I didn't. Ruth, I said. She stopped. I'm not calling to have the conversation you're expecting. I'm not calling to hear your explanation. I've heard James's version. I don't need yours to understand what happened. Then why are you calling? She said. Because you are my family. And what you did was wrong. And I needed to say that to you directly. Not through anyone else. To you. Silence. You called me in October. To see what I knew. A very long silence. Yes, she said finally. That's what I needed to understand. Whether it was a mistake you couldn't stop, or something you were managing. Now I know. Claire, I said. I'll be in touch through my attorney's office. I hung up. I sat in my kitchen. The egg cups were in the cabinet. I looked at the cabinet for a moment. Then I got up and I started making dinner for Owen. The divorce was filed on a Friday. My attorney's name was Caroline Webb, a woman I had met through Margot who had used her 2 years earlier for an unrelated legal matter and described her as exactly the right person for something you need handled correctly. Caroline was 51. She had practiced family law in Savannah for 24 years. She had the specific quality of someone who has sat across from every kind of human situation and has learned to address each one with the same clear, precise attention. I told her everything. The breakfast table, Owen's words, James's 53 minutes, 9 months, Ruth. She listened without expression, not coldly, but with the practiced neutrality of someone who reserves her reactions after she has all the information. When I finished, she said, "The child's statement at the breakfast table, were there other witnesses?" "James," I said. "And no one else was present." "James has confirmed the substance of what Owen said." "I confirmed everything in the 53 minutes." "Good," I said. "Claire," Caroline said, "I want to ask you something that I ask all my clients. What does a good outcome look like for you? Not legally, personally. What does your life look like in 2 years?" I thought about it. Owen has 2 parents who are honest with him. I have a home that is mine. I have figured out what to do about Ruth. "The aunt," she said. "Yes, she's the harder part. James, I understand. Ruth, I'm still working out." "Take your time with it," Caroline said. "The legal process gives you structure for James. Ruth is yours to figure out on your own timeline." "I know. But," she paused, "if the property involved in your separation includes anything connected to your family, anything Ruth might have access to or interest in—" "The house," I said slowly. "James and I bought the house. Ruth helped us find it. She knows the seller, an old family connection. She was the one who told us it was coming on the market before it was listed." Caroline looked at me. "That's worth understanding. The house was the center of the divorce. Not financially, though it was the largest asset, but in the way that the place you have lived for 5 years becomes the center of the life built inside it. Owen's room, the kitchen I had made my own, the garden in the back that I had planted the year he was born. James and I had bought the house with a seller who I had known, but not dwelt on, was a business associate of Ruth's, a man named Hargrove, who had been part of the specific social and professional network that Ruth moved through, the network of established Savannah families that had been connected for decades. Caroline suggested I have someone look at the transaction, not because there was reason to suspect something specific, because, she said, when you discover that a person you trusted has been managing information and managing narratives, it is worth checking what else they may have been managing. I hired someone, a forensic accountant named David Park, who worked in Charleston and came to Savannah 3 times over the course of the next 6 weeks. What he found was not dramatic. What he found was a pattern. The kind of pattern that suggests that a transaction which appeared straightforward had a secondary layer that none of the principal parties had disclosed. James had not disclosed his professional connection to Hargrove. Ruth had introduced us to Hargrove. Ruth had known about James' professional connection. When I asked James about it, through Caroline, as all our communication now went, he said he had not thought it was relevant to disclose. The look on Caroline's face when she relayed this told me what she thought about that. My mother confronted Ruth in April. I did not ask her to. I did not know she was going to until it had happened. She called me afterward. I went to her house, my mother said. "Mom." "I needed to," she said. "She is my sister. I needed to look at her and say what I had to say." "What did you say?" My mother was quiet for a moment. "I told her," she said, "that I knew something was wrong in November and I'd chosen not to see it, and that my choosing not to see it was my failure, and that I was sorry for that." "You apologized to her?" "No," my mother said. "I acknowledged my own failure, to myself, in front of her, and then I told her that she had used my daughter's trust and my family's love for her as a cover for something she knew was wrong, and that I did not know yet who we would be to each other after this, but that I would not pretend it hadn't happened." I sat with that. How did she respond? "She cried," my mother said. "Ruth doesn't cry easily. She cried." "What did you do?" "I sat with her," my mother said, "because she is my sister and she is crying, and I don't know how not to sit with my sister when she is crying, and then I came home." I thought about that. My mother, 63 years old, 30 years on Gaston Street, 43 years of being Ruth's sister, sitting with Ruth while Ruth cried. Not forgiving, not condemning, just sitting, because she did not know how not to do that. "Thank you for telling me," I said. "Claire," my mother said, "the way you are handling this, the way you are being precise and more careful than most people would be, I want you to know I see that." I had a good example. Owen asked about the eggs again in May. We had been having breakfast, a Tuesday morning, not Sunday, the specific weekday routine that had replaced the Sunday routine as the structure shifted, and he was eating scrambled eggs, which is what he had decided he preferred over the previous months. He looked at his plate. He said, "Daddy, remember when I told you about Daddy's eggs?" "I remember," I said. "Did I say something wrong?" I looked at my son, 5 years old. He had been thinking about this. Children do that. They carry things quietly and return to them when they have had enough time for the question to form. "No," I said, "you didn't say anything wrong." "But things changed," he said. "Yes," I said, "some things changed." "Because of the eggs?" I thought about how to answer this honestly in a way that a 5-year-old could hold. "The eggs helped me understand something that was already true," I said. "You helped me understand something. That's not wrong. That's good." He thought about this. "Okay," he said. He went back to his breakfast. "Mom," he said a few minutes later. "Yes?" "I like your eggs better," he said. I looked at him. "Thank you, Owen," I said. He nodded seriously. He finished his breakfast. The divorce was finalized in June, 3 months after a Sunday morning in March. Caroline shook my hand. She said, "You handled this with real precision, the financial piece especially. Most people wouldn't have looked." "I'm a historian," I said. "I look at documents." "It made a difference," she said. "The settlement was fair in the specific sense of reflecting what was actually true rather than what either party had initially represented. James kept his practice, I kept the house. The secondary layer of the Hargrove transaction had been not criminal, nothing was illegal, but it had informed the negotiation in ways that Caroline understood and used quietly and effectively. Owen had two parents. They were no longer in the same house. They were working on what civil looked like, which was harder than I had expected and more possible than I had feared. I drove home from Caroline's office. I parked in front of the house. I sat in the car. I thought about September, about a Sunday dinner at Ruth's house, about James staying to help with the dishes, about me at home putting Owen to bed, thinking everything was fine. And then I thought about March, about a Sunday morning, about orange juice and toast and 4 ceramic egg cups with blue stripes, about a 5-year-old boy who had simply told the truth about an egg. I got out of the car. I went inside. I made dinner. Savannah remembers everything. I said that at the beginning, and I mean it differently now than I meant it then. A city with 4 generations of my family in it, with a cemetery where I walk my dog on Tuesday evenings, with streets that have been standing long enough to have opinions about the people inside them. This city has been watching what happened in my house and has its own record of it, the way old cities always do. The families who know us know what happened. Not all the details. I have been deliberately private about the details, as has my mother, as has, surprisingly, Ruth. But the broad shape of it, the kind of shape that travels through the specific social architecture of a city like Savannah, quietly, carefully, with the particular weight of things that are known but not said. I have found this, unexpectedly, to be a form of support, not because people have rallied around me dramatically, they have not, but because the specific knowledge that a community holds shapes the way people move through it. The women at my gym who look at me with a particular warmth that is more than ordinary friendliness. The colleague at the university where I teach who brought me a meal without being asked. The neighbor on the next block who said one morning, simply, "You're doing well." Not a question, a statement. Savannah sees. Ruth and I have not spoken since the Thursday phone call. That is 7 months now. 7 months of silence between an aunt and a niece who had, for 35 years, spoken regularly and with genuine warmth. I do not know what the silence will eventually become. My mother sees Ruth. She has told me, carefully, without editorializing, that Ruth is smaller, somehow. That the specific confidence that was always Ruth's most visible quality, the quality that made her kitchen the center of every family gathering, and her opinions the reference point for most family decisions, that quality has diminished. She is still in her house on Jones Street. She still tends her garden, but the Sunday dinners are not at her house anymore. They are at my mother's. That is a change that has happened quietly, without discussion, through the collective understanding of a family that has had to reorganize itself around something that happened. I go to Sunday dinners at my mother's. Owen goes. James does not, which is appropriate. The table is different than it was, but it is still a table. I have thought many times about Owen's words at the breakfast table. Daddy doesn't like them like that anymore. A 5-year-old stating a preference change he had observed. He had not been trying to reveal anything. He had been trying to be helpful. He had noticed that his father's egg preference had changed, and he had wanted his mother to have accurate information for future egg preparation. That is the complete and total extent of what Owen was doing. And yet, what arrived with that information, the specific structure it carried, The geography of where the eggs had been made and by whom and under what circumstances contained everything. Not because Owen knew, because the truth does not require knowledge to travel. It travels in the gaps between what people say and what they do. It travels in the details, the small, specific, apparently trivial details that children notice, because children are paying attention to the world with a directness that adults have learned to filter. Owen was not filtering. He was 5 years old, and he was telling his mother about an egg, and the egg was, in its small ceramic way, the entire story. I have kept the egg cups, the ceramic ones with the blue stripe, my grandmother's. I use them on Sunday mornings. 4 of them, still, because Owen uses one and I use one, and the other 2 are just part of the set, and you do not discard things because of what happened around them. You keep using them. They are just cups. Owen is 5.5 now. He has started kindergarten. He has a best friend named Sam, who he talks about constantly, and who I have met twice. A serious, thoughtful child who Owen describes as very good at explaining things, which is exactly the kind of friend Owen would choose. He sees James on Wednesdays and every other weekend. He carries both worlds with the specific adaptability of children who are loved consistently in both worlds. He has not mentioned the egg again. I do not think he has forgotten it, but he has, in the way of children, moved forward from it into the next things: kindergarten, Sam, the specific absorbing business of being 5.5 years old. I have tried to do the same. Move forward. Not by leaving anything behind. I have found that leaving things behind is not how I work. I carry what I carry, and I get familiar with its weight, and eventually the weight becomes part of me, rather than something separate that I'm carrying. The Sunday mornings are quieter now. It is just Owen and me at the table. He sits where he always sat. I make the eggs. His scrambled, as he has decided he prefers. Mine soft-boiled, as I have always preferred and will continue to prefer, because they are mine and I am not changing them. The ceramic cups with the blue stripe, my grandmother's. The Sunday morning light through the kitchen window. And Owen, usually still in his pajamas, telling me something about his week with the specific, comprehensive detail of a child who believes that all information is relevant and that his mother wants to hear all of it. He is right about that. I do. That's the whole story, or the part I'm ready to tell. I want to say something about the egg, about the specific, trivial Sunday morning egg that arrived at the breakfast table and turned the next 7 months inside out. There is a kind of truth that hides in the ordinary, in the preferences we develop, in the things we stop doing and the things we start doing, in the small changes in routine that we do not think to explain because we do not believe anyone is paying attention to notice. We are wrong about who is paying attention. Children are paying attention. They notice the egg preference changing, and they file it away, and when the moment seems right, they bring it out because they believe all information is relevant. They are right. All information is relevant. The egg was relevant, and the person who made it, and the kitchen where it was made, and the 7 months of decisions that led a man to eat eggs in someone else's kitchen and to tell someone other than his wife that they were their favorite. All of it was in that egg. I looked at it clearly, and then I did something with what I saw. If there is something in your life that has been shifting, some small preference that has changed, some detail that doesn't quite fit, some ordinary moment that carries something heavier than it should, look at it. Not with fear, with the clear attention of someone who trusts what they see. The truth is usually much closer than you think. Sometimes it is sitting across from you at the breakfast table, saying something about an egg. I am still in my house in Savannah, still walking in the cemetery on Tuesday evenings, still making eggs on Sunday mornings. The cups have a blue stripe. My grandmother gave them to me. I use all 4 of them still, because 4 is how many there are, and they are mine. Thanks for listening.